and it was shaped by conflict, loss, and economic debilitation. It originates in the global north, and Trevor York, in his book 2011 book Art Deco House Styles, this is how he describes this style: a style that looked to the future and reveled in modernity and the exotic, having houses with streamlined white exteriors and bold geometric patterns within, inspired by designs from across the globe and using new materials, as opposed to homes imitating Tudor or Georgian structures. It is also a style, as described by York and other writers, it's also a style that gave voice to middle class aspirations of the time. York refers to the growth in the car, aircraft, electrical appliance, and chemical industries, mainly in towns and cities of the south of England and the Midlands, that created an expanding number of white-collar workers and managers, in turn leading to a growth of the suburbia and the mushrooming of new houses built in a motley group of styles incorporating diverse elements now referred to by the term Art Deco. So, are my slides visible? Sorry, I can't see the screen. I can only see my own PowerPoint before me. So just asking the others, can you see my
Yes, sir.
slides?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yes, sir. Thank you so much. So, as Trevor York describes this style, it's basically refers to a motley group of style incorporating a diverse range of architectural elements, and also in a way gives voice to middle class aspirations. Now, coming to India, Mumbai or Bombay is the city that is traditionally associated with the Art Deco style. In the context of India, Mumbai, Bombay, as I was just saying, is the city that is associated with Art Deco architecture. In the context of Mumbai, Mustansi Dalvi, in his 2021, he's given a presentation, and he's not yet, published a book, but he has given numerous presentations on the Art Deco architecture of Mumbai. He has studied the contemporary developments in the 1930s and 40s in terms of mobility, livelihood aspirations, popular culture, and aesthetic choices, and a paradigmatic change in building technology, especially the rising use of RCC, or reinforced cement concrete, that transformed building styles all over India. This is what led to an easy assimilation of the Art Deco style and the eventual emergence of a kind of high Indian Art Deco. This is the term that Dalvi uses, by some of the princely states earlier, and later by the more quotidian architecture of the Indian middle class. And this is a typical building. Whenever you Google Art Deco, Mumbai or Bombay, this is a typical building. The image that comes up, it's a building on Marine Drive, resembling the kind of ship, the nautical architecture, because Mumbai is a city which is also very close to the port. A lot of the Art Deco architecture, the circular kind of architecture of Art Deco, resembles the kind of, tries to ape the nautical style of of the marine kind of industry. The Indian Institute of Architects, founded in Bombay in 1929, also played a prominent or seminal role in propagating the Art Deco movement. Okay, now let's talk about Kolkata. Now, Kolkata does not have a specific Art Deco style. What it does have is what I'm trying to get at, and this is something which was started in 2015 by writer Amit Chaudhary. He began a movement for the conservation of the residential houses of South Kolkata. And Chaudhary writes, I quote him, when we speak of Calcutta's architecture, we usually mean the colonial institutions that the British erected. We think of our writers' building, we think of the grand colonial monuments of central Calcutta, or the aristocratic mansions of North Calcutta built by the Bengali landowners. But the houses I am speaking of were built by anonymous builders for middle-class Bengali professionals, lawyers, doctors, civil servants, and professors. Chaudhary opines that these incorporate various Art Deco elements, such as, and this is something that Chaudhary comes up with, semicircular balconies, a long vertical strip comprising glass panes for the stairwell, porthole-shaped windows, and the famous sunrise motif on grills and gates. Now, you see, as I was saying, in Kolkata, these are things, there was someone who was talking about this with me the other day and was saying it is something so commonplace when we are walking through the neighborhoods of South Kolkata, through Lake Town, through Rashbihari, through Gorihat, Gold Park, these areas, this is something so commonplace, something like the red oxidized floor, the grills, that we don't immediately recognize or register it as Art Deco. And that's what Amit Chaudhary was trying to sort of float this idea, which led to the foundation of this initiative called the Calcutta Architecture Legacies, or CAL. I have a link to their website. If you want, I can share this with you. They also have a Facebook page where they talk about the importance of preserving and conserving some of these neighborhoods and these houses of South Kolkata. Dipanjan Ghosh, who is a journalist, a friend of mine, describes the Art Deco elements seen in many of the residential buildings of South Kolkata as, I quote Ghosh, more a result of jugaad than formal architectural decisions. And this is something that Dipanjan Ghosh also talks about. This is the Victoria House, which was built during the 1930s in Kolkata, and now it is the headquarters of the CSC. Okay, it's typical of an Art Deco building incorporating a diverse or motley group of elements. The other most sort of defining Art Deco building in Kolkata, it's renovated and stands today. It's the Metro Cinema Hall Esplanade, built in 1935, with its waterfall-style columns. You can see it's an old photo. It has been renovated, but the structure more or less remains, some of it, designed by architect Thomas White Lamb. So Dipanjan Ghosh, he quotes scenographer and artist Sharup Dotto, pointing to a peculiarity in the law of Bengal that allows civil engineers and draftsmen to file the plans for a building as opposed to architects, as required in other states. This led to homeowners saving an additional amount of money as construction cost. What Ghosh describes as jugaad, he refers to the Art Deco style in Kolkata as a kind of, as a jugaad kind of style, is ultimately the demand that middle-class Bengalis could make of their engineers or contractors. Amake metro style bari baniye dao. So make me a house that resembles the metro. So that was the defining kind of template in their heads. And Ghosh also talks about this, I quote Ghosh, because civil engineers were concerned with the technical side of construction instead of the aesthetic, the response was to present their clients with a collection of templates. These would then be tweaked according to each client's needs. Since the buildings in areas like Hindustan Park and Lake Temple Road all came up around the same time and used the same technique, entire neighborhoods ended up looking like variations on a theme. Now, this is my conjecture, possible reasons, and this is something, as I said right at the outset of the talk, this is a work in progress. These are my conjectures. Possible reason for the growth of Art Deco style homes in the South Kolkata neighborhoods from the mid-1950s. There is this post-1971, Bengali identitarian aspiration that is at work here. And we all know about this story of the change of South Kolkata's sort of geodemography, the change of the urban space of South Kolkata, the move from colony areas into some of these eventually becoming posh areas. So we might read an identitarian aspiration into this. Also, a marked shift from the North Kolkata residential buildings of the traditional Bengali elite with the Thakur Dalan and the large joint family. There's a shift from, the large joint family structure, the Thakur Dalan structure, and the big structures which we are used to seeing in the, in the Bonedi Bari Puju or the Jorashako Thakur Bari, to, a more nuclear kind of house, the middle class house of South Kolkata. South Kolkata is primarily middle class nature, a mixed and motley group of homeowners, artisans, and engineers, and a random mushrooming of houses and neighborhoods instead of a fixed template. Now, this is where the main thrust of my talk lies, what I'm going to be talking about today, towards reuse and conservation, commercialization of the South Kolkata neighborhoods. One reason why, the question can be posed, why did South Kolkata suddenly become a center for all these cafes and tea salons to start mushrooming? Possible reason could be trade and business because of the proximity of market areas like Gorihat, Rashbihari More, Dokhinapon. That could be one of the reasons. Trade and commerce could be a reason why South Kolkata suddenly, became an area where these cafes started mushrooming. There was perhaps also a need for recreating the quintessential Bengali Adda, which is traditionally associated with North Kolkata, the Rocket Adda. And I'll be talking a little more about this in a while when I'll be showing you some of these slides. So there was this attempt to recreate the Adda, the quintessential Bengali Adda, which is associated with North Kolkata. A reinvigoration of the coffee house culture that began with the coffee house, the famous coffee house of College Street in 1942, which was opened in 1942. The Albert Hall becomes the coffee house in 1942. Later, the coffee house Jadavpur, they opened branches throughout Kolkata, and also the tea salon culture that began with Fleury's in Park Street in 1927. Are my slides visible? Can you see my slides? Sorry, I keep
Yes, sir.
asking that.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Kolkata is also increasingly becoming what we commonly, talk among friends and refer to as a geriatric city. Sadly, unfortunately, with the majority of the city's urban population above the age of 50, and this is not me, there is data that substantiates this statement that I'm making. With children working outside or abroad, it is increasingly difficult for elderly people to maintain the property. Sometimes, after the demise of parents, in the case of Bunafil, I will not be able to look at Bunafil in detail here because of the paucity of time. Let me just say that Bunafil is actually the house of Navonita Devshin, and just opposite Fab India and Gorihat. I'll be looking at 8th day rather. And Bunafil was earlier Bumkari. It was a boutique, and then later Nandana Devshin, after Navonita Dev passed away, she decided to turn it into a cafe. So that's one of the cases that I'm talking about. Also, the 8th day Hindustan Park, which belongs to a friend of mine who is settled with his partner, his queer partner, abroad, and he has leased the ground floor of his house in Hindustan Park to the 8th day chain. We'll be taking a closer look at 8th day. The children living outside or abroad decide to lease part of the property, in particular the ground floor or the garage area, for the construction of these cafeterias. Fear of real estate tycoons, and this is very obvious, I don't have to stress on this point, and the demolition of the house to make way for an apartment or condominium. We have been seeing a lot of this, and part of the reason that Amit Chaudhary started the group CAL was to be able to float a kind of a consciousness amongst youngsters to prevent the demolition of these houses, to conserve what he saw as an important architectural legacy of South Kolkata, especially in the absence of the owners or occupants. So the children are settled abroad, they settle outside, parents pass away, they're unable to look after the property, so the tycoons come in, and a lot of things happen, leads to the demolition of the property. Okay, now let me come to the main thrust of what I was talking about. Let's take a look at how some of these important buildings in South Kolkata have been changed, and the space has been recast, reappropriated to accommodate a cafeteria or a tea salon. This is the famous Milidrug Coffee and Bistro, located at Lansdowne Terrace in Kolkata. And Milidrug basically means dear friend in Russian. So originally, the Milidrug was located at the Russian Center of Science near Gorky at Gorky Shodon, and the owner is a Bengali person called Shattuki Manna, and he has a Russian wife, Irina Sergeyevna. So Shattuki Manna, in one of the interviews, he talks about how during the COVID pandemic, and the COVID will keep coming back again and again through this presentation, their original sort of cafe at the Russian Center in Gorky Shodon, they were facing, due to pecuniary and economic issues, they were forced to shut down. But I quote him, he also says this was a blessing in disguise, I'm quoting him, for because of massive economic slowdown, the lease value of properties reduced substantially. So after the Gorky Shodon closed down, they were able to kind of lease this property, this building in Lansdowne area, and turn it into a cafeteria. This is the interior. It shows a floor with checkerboard patterns. This is inside the Milidrug. The designer Indranil Gupta describes it as art deco with a flair of off-white and rose gold hues. You see, they have tried to retain some of the original flooring of the old house. This, of course, is not the original flooring. This is imitating the original flooring of the house, the checkered kind of marble tiles, but they have tried to retain some of the original sort of feel of the old building. And you will see that this floor in particular, is my slide visible?
Yes,
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 it
sir.
is visible.
Yeah, thank you so much. This flooring in particular is part of the original flooring of the house. So, and Indranil Gupta, the designer, he says that he wanted to retain the neoclassical and colonial vibe of the interiors. And here, when you take a look at this rounded kind of staircase, this is a very sort of Art Deco element there, the rounded kind of structure. This is retained the flooring is retained, the staircase is retained. So these are some of the elements they retained from the original house. So here you have a very interesting reappropriation or reuse of space. And I'll be talking about the implications of this right at the end of my presentation. Now, how this also serves to protect, to save, to conserve the space, to conserve the building, and also kind of reinvent it, reappropriate it for newer use. Okay, now this is, some of you may have heard of it. Just for the record, Millidrug opened in 2022, the new sort of venue at Lansdowne that opened in 2022. Bhawanipur House also opened in 2022. Now, Bhawanipur House is a slightly different story. The owners, Vishnu and Vishal Sureka, they are part of realtors. They're part of the real estate. So Prakash Group Realtors, and initially when they had acquired the building, they basically wanted to tear it down or to turn it into something else. Then again, COVID came and they couldn't sort of carry out their plan. And slowly they wanted, the idea struck them that why don't we enter the hospitality industry, the food and beverage industry, and convert this, keep the house as it is and convert it into a cafe. Okay, and this is what Vishnu Sureka, says, and I quote him: 100 years ago, Cinema Para used to be Cinema Paradiso, and the Adda was a way of life. Today, life moves faster, and the proverbial Adda is a luxury. A home for every Calcuttan at 131B, that's the address, Priyonath Mollik Road. This glorious tradition was reborn. The Bhawanipur House is a beautiful witness to Calcutta of the old. With our vision and ideas, we have turned this heritage bungalow into the next go-to spot for young and old alike. The essence of Calcutta can find its home between its high ceilings, thick walls, and incredible old world charm. Okay, so this is the interior of the Bhawanipur house, and as you can see, it is trying to commoditize and sell this idea of cultural nostalgia, something we Bengalis are very, very fond of, in fact. And we'll see how nostalgia remains operative in a different way. We'll see that when we are talking about a completely different place right at the end of the presentation. So it is commoditizing, packaging, selling this idea of nostalgia. It's also recreating the idea of the Bengali Adda, revitalizing, recreating the idea of the Bengali Adda, and also recreating the old coffee house feel. If you look at the interiors of this space, you will get some kind of a feel of the coffee house of College Street. I don't want to dwell too much on Bhawanipur House because, at the end of the day, this is a typical case of, the hawk cook becoming the rock cook. Basically, it's kind of realtors stepping in to protect the house, which they had initially, bought in order to destroy and build a condominium. I don't want to dwell too much on the Bhawanipur House and instead move to a place we are all very fond of. The Flurries, the newly opened Flurries, this is the new wing which is opened at Hindustan Park in South Kolkata. This is a Hajra family house. And once again, I know the person, I know the the people, it's the Hajra family home, the people who live on the first floor of the house on Indo Hajra. And after his cousin's mother passed away, they decided to lease the ground floor to Flurries. Okay. And here, once again, this is kind of interesting how the opening of Flurries in South Kolkata also perhaps, and once again, this needs to be thought through and theorized, perhaps, I told right at the outset, this is a work in progress, is perhaps also symptomatic of a shift of the urban center from Park Street to Purnodash Road. Maybe 5 years down the line, people visiting Calcutta would say, let's go to that Cafe Para of Kolkata. And now people coming to the city keep on saying, let's go to Park Street, let's go to Esplanade. Maybe another 5 years down the line, with more such cafes and tea salons mushrooming in the area, they would say, let's go and visit the Cafe Para of South Kolkata. So perhaps the Flurries opening in South Kolkata may be symptomatic, perhaps be symptomatic of this shift of the center. This is once again the interior of Flurries. It retains the original Italian marble flooring of the old house, which was taken on lease. And this is also one of the windows which I took a snap of. This is a typical Art Deco window because it has, as you can see, bold geometric patterns, the original kind of trellised wood style. And what it has done is it's just painted it over. So retains much of the original feel of the old house, as well as makes some changes and sort of appropriates it to newer use. The interior is very interesting. It doubles up as a bakery museum. So this is once again, and each place would require a detailed study. This is a work in progress, and I'm just taking you kind of just through the basics of it all. The interior doubles up as a bakery museum, exhibiting photographs from the initial years of the introduction of Swiss confectionery to Calcutta by Mr. and Mrs. J. Fleury. The Park Street sort of Fleury's was opened in 1927 and by the Swiss couple. And you see there are some photographs which looks back at the history of introduction of Swiss bakery to India. And, it kind of doubles up as a bakery museum of sorts. This is the cafe that I was talking about, the 8-Day Cafe and Bakery at Hindustan Park. They have another outlet, the earlier outlet, in fact, in near Park Circus, opposite the Bangladesh sort of consulate. So 8-Day belongs actually to my friend Deep Jyoti. As I mentioned, Deep Jyoti Ghosh, he's settled now. Deep Jyoti and his sister Deep Duti. And as I was speaking to Deep Jyoti, he told me this story of how they sort of decided to lease part of their ground floor to 8-Day chain. He's now settled in, I think, in Johannesburg, and his sister, she's on and off in Calcutta. She works with the Marriott. And Deep Jyoti told me his mom passed away in 2014, I think. And his father, who was suffering from cancer of the larynx, also passed away in 2017. And, on and off, people had been approaching them. Offices had been approaching them. Azad Hind had approached them to sort of lease out the space, and the father had refused. Till the parents were alive, they did not want to let out the house. But after the parents passed away, within a month of it, they had the robbery, and that was the defining moment. And Devjyoti is very sort of dramatic when he describes this moment to me. He told me the day we went to file the Thana diary, Jedin korte gelam, the day we went to file the diary was also the day we decided to sign the lease to grant of the 8th day, because we decided that was the only way, because none of us lived in the city. That was the only way we could protect the property, we could save the property. So this is a typical example of, as I was talking about, with children living abroad, with parents aging and parents passing away. This may be seen as, a very important, maybe perhaps the only way of actually conserving, protecting these houses. And if you look at the outside area, the patio area, sitting area outside, the cafe kind of resembles the rock of North Kolkata. So it's trying to recreate the rock of North Kolkata, the Rocky Adda of North Kolkata. Also kinds of shows you how the idea of the Adda itself has shifted, geographically shifted its location from the traditional rock of North Kolkata into these neighborhoods of South Kolkata. Okay, now this last tea salon that I'm going to be talking about, this is a very interesting and unique kind of place. I call it the Bengali entrepreneur and the Darjeeling Connect, the story of First Flush and the IT person turned businessman, Dr. Shubhashish Mitro. This is First Flush, located on Goriahat Road. And Dr. Mitro, I spoke to him. He's also from JU. He graduated from JU in 1982. And he told me, how he was kind of initially influenced by the coffee house culture of Jadavpur. And he wanted to create an AC space for people to come in and to be able to talk to each other, to be able to engage with each other. And he also deeply loves Darjeeling, and this is something I'm going to be speaking about. He also deeply loves Darjeeling. He keeps on visiting Darjeeling, and he wanted to create a slice of Darjeeling in Kolkata. So the interior decor of First Flush tries to replicate, this is in Dr. Mitro's own words, the decor and the ambience of Glenaries of Darjeeling. Most of us who have happened to visit Darjeeling would have happened to also visit Glenaries. The interior is made to kind of replicate Glenaries of Darjeeling. And Dr. Mitra, I quote him, the place, before they leased the place, they took the place on lease. It was a typical office earlier with cubicles before we obtained it on lease. We dismantled the place, in particular the false ceiling. The original flooring was retained, however, as wooden floors. Glenaries in Darjeeling typically has wooden floors, are notoriously difficult to maintain in Kolkata, especially if one is on the ground floor. Now, they also have a mock fireplace. The interior designer of this place, Pubali De, who happens to be the sister-in-law of Dr. Mitro, she later added a fireplace. It's a mock fireplace, of course. You can see it has got those kind of those sparkling lights and some wood to just kind of give you the feel, replicate the feel of a fireplace. It's trying to definitely create Raj era nostalgia and trying to, of course, create this idea of Darjeeling. And Dr. Mitra also told us how when they kind of redesigned the place, dismantled the place, and kind of redesigned it. They wanted to keep they did not want to conceal the wires and wanted to keep the wires kind of open in those pipes to give you the old world kind of Darjeeling old world feel. These are some of the photographs. This is a photograph of the Darjeeling Shoila Bash, which hangs right above the fireplace. And these other photographs are all of them are taken by Dr. Mitro. And he told me how he sources his tea. He has a tea estate manager, retired tea estate manager as a dear friend of his. And he sources his tea directly from Darjeeling and not from the auctioneers. And he keeps on going in once or twice every year. And all these photographs of Darjeeling, of the people and places associated with Darjeeling, are all taken by him. They're all kind of framed and put up at various places inside First Flush. You can see the central image is that of the Kangchenjunga, and these are photographs of the place as I described. So this place is definitely trying to create the idea of Darjeeling in absentia. And this will be a digression from the talk, but let me just say this to you, having lived in Darjeeling for 6 years, kind of the middle class Bengali imagination of Darjeeling is itself filtered through a British colonial imagination of Darjeeling as a very picturesque place with the Kanchenjunga, a land of tea. And that is how we have kind of inherited this imagination. Of course, the Darjeeling is actually very, very different from what we imagine it to be. But this imagination itself is filtered through a colonial kind of lens is what I'm trying to get at. But that again is a digression and not directly related to what I'm talking about today. So nonetheless, the interior of this place is done in an attempt to recreate a feel of Darj. And, he also told me how they sometimes play host to in-house performances, promoting young artists. You may have heard of this singer, Shahana Bajpayee. She was there, recently, and she's a friend of the family. She keeps on performing at the venue. So they have ticketed in-house concerts, and, they have these old objects from different places. The post box, the postal box here is also, if you ever visit Glenaries in Darjeeling, or, if some of you have already visited, you will see that they have this very, kind of British English style postal boxes, so the letter boxes. So that is also kind of somehow trying to create the feel of Darjeeling, everything except those cane chairs. And these are some of the posters. So they have in-house concerts also to promote independent artists and young artists. So I come to the end of this presentation, and there are a few things which we will be taking away from this. So what is ultimately the import or the implication of these cafes, these tea salons, which have mushroomed throughout different parts of South Kolkata, particularly in and around the Purnadas Road, Golpark, Gorihat, and Rajbihari areas? It kinds of shifts the Art Deco gaze to Kolkata. As I mentioned right at the outset, Bombay is the city that is traditionally associated with Art Deco. You Google Art Deco in India, the first thing you come up with is Bombay. So it kind of helps in shifting the gaze to Kolkata. It also helps in the transformation of South Kolkata residential neighborhoods into thriving commercial centers. As I was talking about, perhaps a symbolic shift from Park Street, and I mentioned this maybe in 5 years down the line. When people visit the city, they'll actually be wanting to go to the cafe para, or the tea para, or the coffee para of South Kolkata. It reinvents, and I mentioned all of these points, but this is just a kind of summing up of all of them, reinventing the idea of the quintessential Bengali Adda in a post-pandemic era. As you see, the pandemic also helped or sort of brought about some of these businesses, recasts the notion of space into safeguarding, conserving the architectural uniqueness of South Kolkata. I began my talk with this. I began my talk with sort of quoting Amit Chaudhary and the CAL. It commoditizes and markets nostalgia. We also spoke about this point. One very important point is this idea of the rise of Bengali entrepreneurship. You see in a lot of these businesses, whether Milli Drug or whether the First Flush, you see a lot of these Bengalis are now venturing into this business, the business of the cafeteria. So it also promotes the idea of Bengali entrepreneurship. Newer articulations of Bengali identitarian formulations through architecture, of course, because in a way, these houses are being safeguarded, they're being conserved, they're being reused, but also through the bonds that are forged in and through these spaces, especially in a post-COVID era, the bonds that are forged through these spaces. And this is something that, Dr. Mitro of First Flush told me when I was interviewing him. He said that, among his clientele, a chunk of them are women, elderly women who just come sit there, have tea, and talk to each other, a space they get which they otherwise may not have had access to. So, through the bonds that is forged in and through these spaces. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I once again extended thanks to WBSU and to Snehadi and to Chandrabadi for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Parjanya, for your extremely illuminating and interesting paper, and for this in-depth research that you have undertaken so far. So we have been enlightened about how some of the South Calcutta councils have gone for commercialization to preserve the property, and they have also sustained and preserved the architectural heritage of South Calcutta by using this space. Now, I'm sure there will be lots of questions. Uh, I have, let me begin with some observational questions that I have, and then we can go to the other viewers who are there. Um, do you really think that South Calcutta coffee houses recreate the North Calcutta Rocky Adda, or there is a distinct Western influence and its recreation in South Calcutta? Okay, so this is my first question. The other one is this just an observation? You can, I'll be happy if you comment on that. You see, in North Calcutta also, since I have my ancestral houses in North Calcutta, there are huge mansions, there's something that we call Rajbaris or Jomidar Baris. And these houses, they are also being reused now for commercial purposes. Most of them have turned into, say, ceremony house. I know a house, Devede Rajbari, which has turned into a ceremony house, and it also houses a restaurant. You know, it's very fashionable to call these restaurants multi-cuisine restaurants. So one such restaurant is there. Um, but North Calcutta has not produced the kind of cafeterias that we see in South Calcutta. But the idea of preserving and sustaining property and heritage houses, that has taken a very different route in South Calcutta. So I would just like you to comment on that. Thank you.
Do I take the questions together?
Whatever.
Thank you so much, Chandrabati. That's actually a very valid intervention. Since you mentioned, I would say to your first question, I would say, yeah, both. It is kind of recreating the idea, or maybe, kind of, once again, packaging the idea is a better word, packaging the idea of the Adda, because it's trying to sell that. And some of these, entrepreneurs themselves say we are trying to recreate the space of the Adda. At the same time, also, there is definitely a Western influence at work, because we have a kind of the idea, and this cafe phenomenon is not something that is unique to Kolkata. It is there in a lot of other cities. It has been there in Bangalore for a while now. It's there in Goa. In Goa, there's an entire neighborhood, which has these Art Deco buildings. I'm forgetting the name. It starts with an F. Which has these Art Deco buildings turned cafeterias. So it's kind of, we are living in this kind of globalization era. What strikes me as interesting is how this movement comes to Kolkata in and around the time of the pandemic. Okay, and this needs to also be thought through, perhaps the reasons why South Kolkata is kind of turning out to be this cafe para area. And to also answer kind of your question on the North Kolkata buildings, yes, a lot of the North Kolkata palatial buildings have also been reused. But you see, there is one crucial difference. In North Kolkata, particularly, what has been happening is the conversion into guest houses. And this is something, guest houses or kind of boutique hotels is what you will see. More of, I'm sure there are also cafeterias or, restaurants, but we see more of that may also have to do with how the two spaces are geodemographically very, very different. You may have more of a kind of cafe crowd in and around South Kolkata. Also, perhaps the buildings themselves, kind of dictate a certain notion of space. And perhaps because the South Kolkata buildings are also very different from the North Kolkata ones, they incorporate a lot of these Art Deco elements with which I began the lecture. They are perhaps more kind of, it's more easy for them to be, tuned into this cafeteria space, the cafeteria culture. But as you rightly pointed out, these are things that need to be thought through and, to be explored further.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Ankita also has a question. Has
Yeah.
raised her hand.
Yeah, Onkita, yes. Thanks for listening in.
Hello, Parjanya. It was a wonderful talk and
Thanks,
very
Onkita.
interesting discussions happening. And I personally would like to add something to what Chandrova ma'am just commented upon, because I've lived like 30 years of my life in North Calcutta, and the last 5 6 years I've been living in South Calcutta. So I have a observation regarding why we have a lot of old houses in North Calcutta, and yet we don't find that many cafes. And even if they try to come out with them, I don't think they are all commercially very viable. I think the commerce part is very important that we have to keep in mind in this. South Calcutta indeed has families who are financially far better off than those who are in North Calcutta. And the reason that, ma'am talked about Deveder Bari, how it has been, most of them are being given out for BA Baris and all such other purposes, is because they are unable to maintain the houses. And whenever they are coming out with, say, cafes, even like a cafe like a CCD, a very basic CCD came out in North Calcutta, where I used to live, near Shobha Bajar. And after 2 years, they could not run it because they don't have takers who would come and buy a coffee for, say, $300. So I think this is something which we have to keep in mind, why, a Puno Dash Road, it's able to keep these many people, because I can go and buy a coffee for $500 there, but when I go back to my old Calcutta Para, I would also be like, এখানে 500 টাকা দিয়ে কফি খাবো, মানে এখানে মানে এ তো পাড়ার চায়ের দোকানে খেতে পারি. So I think the financial part is also a very important reason why North Calcutta is not being able to, cope up with this.
No, another thing
Uh,
also
uh,
I would like to add to this.
Yes, ma'am.
yeah,
As
Chandra,
you
please go ahead.
pointed out, it is the mindset of the people. They would not like to pay. Maybe they will go to South Calcutta and buy a coffee from Starbucks.
Exactly, ma'am.
Or
I am guilty of the
they
same
will not
thing.
pay. That is the problem. I've
Exactly.
experienced
Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ankita. That's a very valuable point you raised. Also, I think there is another reason. If we look at it, I think globalization entered South Kolkata early. The mall culture, for instance, you had the defining South City Mall. The
Right.
South City Mall, and then the Quest came, and then the all the malls, the Acropolis, Metropolis Mall, all of them are kind of concentrated in these areas. Not exactly Punodash Road area, but in parts of South Kolkata. So I think that also has something to do with this. Somebody who is shopping at the mall, say a South City Mall, can immediately, let's go and have a cup of coffee somewhere. Let's not use the food court. Let's have this patio like sitting area. We can have a nice chat. So they would immediately choose. Purnadash Road is quite close by. It's also quite close by to Acropolis and to Quest Mall. So perhaps that may also be a reason. You see, the two parts of Kolkata entered, I think, the mall culture, this kind of neoliberal globalization culture at different junctures of time. So could also have to do with that. Once again,
Right.
these things need to be thought through. Yeah, but
Right.
thank you for pointing that
Thank you.
out.
there are two questions, I suppose, one from A. Palit and the other from Tanya Dhara. Can we go to uh, the first one who raised the hand? I think it is A. Palit who would like to comment or on Portugal's statement or ask a question.
Yes, Honor Punadi.
Hi, Parjanya. That was a brilliant presentation, actually. Now, am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Okay, okay. Now, thanks for a brilliant presentation. Now, I was just wondering, this whole idea that you say about private spaces becoming public. Do you think these houses that have become cafeterias are actually following a tradition of, say, the palaces which have turned into big hotels. You think of, the palaces in Jaipur, or even, I think, the Pataudi palaces. They've been, taken over by big hotels, or they've allowed them to become big hotels. So there again, private spaces have become public spaces. And here on a smaller scale, homes becoming cafeterias. Do you see this as a tradition that is being followed? I mean, or it has just simply happened?
Thank you so much, Annapurnadi. I have never thought of it that way, but possibly, there are, I'm sure, multiple reasons. As Chandrabati was also saying, kind of global North influences, Western influences, and also local influences which have played into the mushrooming of this cafe culture. And in fact, not just houses. For instance, the newest thing we have all seen is the tram center being converted to a cafe. You have the Alipur jail museum, and I think there's also a small cafeteria there. So I think it's also this random kind of, not random, this concerted growth of coffee kind of culture which we are now seeing. And I think when and in terms of these neighborhoods, you see, when one kind of house does it, the other houses in the area kind of get the idea, and everybody starts kind of joining in that the whole kind of movement, the fray. And eventually it also leads to a change in the neighborhood itself, in the characteristics of the neighborhood itself. It becomes from a residential to a commercial venture. But I'm digressing. Coming back to the question that you asked, yes, possibly also influenced by how these palatial buildings of Jaipur and other places are turning into boutique hotels. And then maybe from there, but also I am sure there are other influences from the global north, other influences from other places in India. I mentioned, Goa as an instance. There are other instances from Bangalore where, this coffee culture has taken off in a very big way.
Hello, anyone else?
Thank you so much, Parjanya.
Would anybody else like to answer a question? Yes, Tania Bhara.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello, sir. So we have seen that Adda is a contemporary socio-cultural political exchange. So how can it be properly done in the
I can't hear you
cafe
properly. Can you
cultures
just
of
repeat,
South
please?
Calcutta, segregated from real life by fake aesthetics or media of aesthetics, and accompanied with Western music? And I
Tanya,
want
you're
to
not properly audible. There's a lot of echo.
another question.
So it's better if you write it. If you write it in the chat box, Fortuna can read it and answer your question. That's better.
Oh, okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yes, in the meanwhile, Mangala, they can pose a question.
Yeah. See, this is not so much. Oh well, I really enjoyed your talk. I'm traveling home in the car, and I still, I had to find a
Thank you
way
so
of
much.
listening to you. So, what I want to say is, if you can hear me clearly, that this is more of a comment. I live in Nagtola, and I remember that between Toliganj, where the studios were, right up to near my place, we've had, I've had pointed out to me Biswajit's house, Suchitra Sen's house, Tapan Sinha's house, and Chobi Bishas's house. And now that I think about it, they were also very much in the Art Deco style. I remember many of the old Bengali films. I particularly love to see the old black and white films, and most of the houses. They did fit into the your picture of the Art Deco. So, in fact, I think once all the houses are broken down and condominiums come up, I think those black and white images will all be there. Will the only things there to remind us what Kolkata looked like at one time.
Thank you so much for that comment. And that is what, I was trying to like sort of say. And Amit Chaudhary, he floated this movement in 2015. And I would request each of us here to at least take a look at that page, CAL, Calcutta Architecture Legacies, and you will see how whenever there is news of a well-known landmark building, an old house being broken down to make way for a condominium, there are people, there are protests, people write about it, they write in the newspapers. Not often are they able to prevent it from happening, but there is a kind of larger consciousness that people have been trying to build around the need to conserve and protect these architecture legacies of a city. So thank you. And yes, a lot of these localities, neighborhoods in South Kolkata, they incorporate these styles. Not it's not a standardized template at all. It's rather taking from, it's a motley kind of style that's drawing upon different sources. And yes, there's a need, very much a need, to conserve and protect these houses.
Uh, there is, I think, Shohini Nath and Achal Shaw. They have raised their hands. So Shohini Nath, can we go to Shohini Nath now?
Yes, hello, sir. By the way, good evening, and it was a very wonderful
Yes, thank you,
presentation.
Shohini.
I thoroughly enjoyed, and as a person who lives in South Kolkata, I do understand with the uprising of coffee culture, and and I had been to Millie Drew Cafe like very recently with my friends. And as you were explaining the Art Deco culture and the owners of the Millie Drew, who is an Indian man and a Russian wife, as well as I have this very like crazy coincidence that I have like observed. Like one of my favorite cafes, which is nearby my home, very near, is Lionston Cafe, and the owners are like a Bengali woman and her French husband. So I would like to point out that with the younger Bengalis who have their foreigner spouse, so is it something like bringing to a new dimension of culture and globalization in Kolkata while opening up cafes with like French inspired, Russian inspired themed cafes and menus to attract the younger generation of Calcutta to have a slice of the country?
Thank you, Shohini. That's a very, very interesting question. And for the others, yes, Shohini is my direct student at Deshbandhu College for Girls, and she's a very bright student now doing a master's in CU. Actually, you're correct when you say that some of these the owners, they have spouses from different countries, and they are able to perhaps bring in a different kind of aesthetics. For example, I was talking about Shatuki Manna and his Russian wife. And there is an interview where he says that they wanted to recreate the idea of the Russian bungalow style experience, and the existence of this bungalow like house in Kolkata gave them the scope and the opportunity to be able to recreate the Russian bungalow like feeling. And if you look at the menu, they're able to bring in a Russian kind of menu. And because see, this also has to be looked at, tied down to the idea of the food culture in Kolkata. I think that does not need to be kind of reinstated how much of a foodie we each of us is. So I think this idea, this ability to have multiple kind of cuisines, Russian cuisine, French cuisine, is also what is then feeding into the idea of the cafe come eatery. And you're right when you say that some of them having partners from abroad is also then dictating the kind of, not just the aesthetics, the art deco aesthetics of the place, but also dictating the menu and kind of catering to the food culture of the existing food culture of Kolkata. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. It was really great, and I had this in my mind when I was like going through your presentation. I really had this in the back of my mind. So yes, thank you, sir, for answering my question, and it was really again a wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Purnama, there are some comments, questions in the chat box. Can you access them or should I read them out?
I'll take a. I see a question from Tania Dhara. So I'll read out the
Yes.
question first, Chandravati. Is that it? I'll just read out the question.
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
Tanya is asking me, we have seen that Adda is a contemporary socio-cultural and political exchange. How can it be properly done in the cafe culture of South Calcutta, segregated from reality by fake aesthetics or mimicry of aesthetics and accompanied with Western music? Having been a frequent visitor of North Calcutta and having witnessed the addas that are frequently done in Hedua Park and different rocks of Shobha Bazar, Hatibagan, Shambhajar and other places, my question to you is, how can we say that the center of rock adda has shifted from North Calcutta to the cafes of South Calcutta? Thank you for the question, Tanya. I was not trying to suggest that the center of the rock adda has shifted. When I was talking about the space of the 8-day cafe, I was basically trying to say how the patio is recreating the idea of the adda. And as another owner, I think it was either the Milidrug or the Bhavanipur house, I don't remember right now. He speaks of the trying to recreate the adda culture. And you see, this is also associated with a space like the coffee house, which has been in existence for a very long time. And not all of these cafes play Western music. I think you need to actually visit some of them, because when you go to some of these places, you see people are working there with their laptops over a cup of coffee. It's very much like what you would see, for instance, in a Paris, in a Paris, or in some of the streets of London. It's just a cafe with Wi-Fi. So you sit there with your laptop, you're working, you're sipping a cup of tea, and your friend joins you. You are having, because I was mentioning right at the start how I and my colleague friend, Dr. Annapurna Palit, we have a lot of our discussions, talks in this cafe. So not all of them, they're not pubs. So not all of them have loud Western music playing. So I think it is definitely, while I will not say that these are replacing the Adda, I would not be that would be outrageous if I made such a claim. All I'm trying to say is that these are drawing upon the idea of the quintessential Bengali Adda, trying to provide a different kind of space to recreate the Adda and trying to commoditize, package, and sell it to a younger generation of Bengalis. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Next question is by, I don't know who the person is. Mud Cafe in Triangular Park is located in Robindra Shongit singer Debabroto Bishwas's house, and they play only Debabroto's old songs. It is truly like a journey back in time. The interiors are done up with cane chairs, is deliberately and deliciously understated. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for referring me to that Mud Cafe in Triangular Park. I haven't visited that, and I would really like to go there. Thank you so much. That's Anupamadi. Thank you so much, Anupamadi. That's
I think Achal has a question.
yeah.
Achal, sure.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a suggestion, Mathil Chakra.
Thank you for the suggestion, Anupamadi. I'll definitely visit the place.
So
Yeah.
Achal has a question.
Hello.
Yes.
Is I'm audible, sir?
Yes, very much. Go on. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, good evening, sir, and thank you very much for your presentation. I have a little question. My question is that you talked about Vishnu Surekha in one of your PPT slides. In 20th century, the cafeteria adda was the way of life, as Vishnu Surekha himself states that. How it is different in 20th century and how it is different in after pandemic when it comes to in context of cultural and nostalgic commoditizing.
Could you repeat the last part of the question? I couldn't get you. How is the what did you say about the context of the pandemic? Just repeat the last bit.
What is the main difference occur when it comes to commoditizing culture and nostalgia during 20th century and after pandemic?
Okay. See. I will not be able to give you a precise answer there. All I can say is, see, the pandemic, a lot of these places come up either during the pandemic or after the pandemic. Okay. So they are definitely trying to package and commoditize nostalgia. Some of them are commoditizing nostalgia. Some of them are also commoditizing, adda, as I was saying, and they are trying to sell it to a newer generation of Bengalis. So I am not entirely sure I get you completely, because some of these places come up during the, like we see in the case of Milidruk, for instance, their Gorki Shodon outlet, they were not able to sort of sustain the place owing to the pandemic, but the pandemic also brought about a price a sort of decrease in the lease value of properties in South Kolkata. So they were immediately able to lease out another property and shift the venue. So, and I don't think there's a marked difference in the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic phase, except that maybe the post the pandemic, more of middle class Bengalis, decided to come out and gather together and kind of forge newer bonds, because we were cooped up for very long in these sort of isolated virtual worlds. So yeah, from that sense, perhaps it has led to a reinvigoration of our familial, our friendly bonds. Yeah.
There are comments in the chat box.
Tanmay Bhattacharji, dear Dr. Sen, this is an observation. I think preserving memory is something that you have tried to emphasize in your presentation. Memory studies are, in fact, an emerging discipline in the contemporary field of sustainability studies, and you have, I think, referred to it in an insightful manner. Thank you for such a brilliant talk. Thank you so much, Tanmay Bhattacharji. Yes, absolutely, you're right. In a way, they're also trying to recreate memory, recreate a bygone or a lost era, recreate nostalgia, and all of these are also hinting at the idea of memory. And as you rightly point out, memory is an important aspect of sustainability studies. So yes, I was also trying to gesture towards that. And thank you for these interventions. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, this is a work in progress. I am doing this, kind of thinking through this. So each of your interventions will be helpful in further kind of shaping this into a more full-fledged, fully fleshed out form.
Is there any more question? If there are no more questions, then we can conclude today's event, because I think Parjanya is tired. He has been bombarded with several questions and comments. So in that case, Sneha will, my colleagues, Dr. Sneha Kaur Choudhury, Sneha, of course, will conclude the program.
Okay. Thank you, Parjanya. This was fascinating, and what I particularly liked is that it's not just a kind of research which is bookish and confined to a shelf-bending kind of an experience, but it is something which is related to our hobbies, our culture, and has a lot of connect with our friends and the affective field of it. And I'm sure it would turn out into an excellent project that you're working on. And I think that this versatility and dynamism about you is something to look forward to as a researcher. And I then would like to thank our director, Dr. Chandraba Chakraborty, for organizing this lecture and giving all the effort to run the center, and to our technical team of students, especially Shornendu Dam, who had prepared a very beautiful poster for this event, and the audience present, especially the faculty members from various colleges and other institutions who have contributed very generously to the interactive session, making it as interesting as possible. And I would like to thank all our past students and our research fellows and our current students. And with this, I think we bring this session to a close. And also, as Chandravali pointed out, we are ending this lecture series. I'm sure we will have Parjanya again on board someday for some other topic and some other lecture. So for now, good night and goodbye to everyone. Thank you.
I would just like to add one point. That is, I would like to book you for the 19th century lecture series as well. Because I'm really interested in the
It's
historical
definitely.
activities of the present world who walked around. Okay?
Thank you so much to
Thank you, everyone.
CSGCM, GSM, and to Snehadi and Chandravati for having me. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for joining us, and good night.
Goodbye.